Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a fascinating set of sources today, focusing on President Trump's big address at the UN General Assembly back in September 2025.
Yeah, this was a significant one. His first time back addressing the UNGA since returning to office earlier that year, about 8 months in.
And our job today really is to dig into what he actually said. Your sources give us quotes, summaries. We want to get past just the headlines.
Exactly. It wasn't just a standard speech declaring American strength. It was laying down markers, specific criticisms, even threats aimed at global partners and institutions, a real signal of policy shifts.
And the sources you sent highlight one claim that, well, it just dominated the coverage. We have to jump straight into that one.
Right.
His assertion about who's financially propping up the war in Ukraine.
Oh, absolutely. That was the bombshell, you could say. By naming specific countries, he wasn't just commenting. He was applying pressure, reframing the whole economic side of the conflict. It really set the tone for everything else. High stakes from the get-go.
Okay, so let's unpack the whole address, starting from the beginning. He opened, interestingly, not with global affairs, but with a very strong declaration about the U.S. itself, proclaiming a golden age of America.
It was a very deliberate contrast he was drawing. The sources show him saying, just a year ago, the country was in deep trouble. But now, 8 months into his term.
Now, he claims the U.S. is the hottest country anywhere in the world, and there is nobody even close. That's a direct quote. Quite the turnaround narrative.
It really is. Forceful. And he backed it up, or tried to, by listing these pillars of strength.
Right, I have them here. The strongest economy, the strongest borders, the strongest military, the strongest friendships, and the strongest spirit. It covers, well, pretty much everything.
It's meant to project comprehensive power, absolutely. And then, from that domestic foundation, he pivoted straight into his own diplomatic record.
Saying this strength leads to results. He brought up ending 7 wars, and also the Abraham Accords from his previous term.
Yeah, and he didn't just list them. He framed it personally. Remember the bit about the Nobel Prize?
I do. He mentioned people say he should get it, but then dismissed the award itself. Said the real prize is, and I'm quoting again, the sons and daughters who live to grow up because millions aren't being killed anymore.
It's a powerful emotional connection, isn't it?
Yeah.
Linking his style of direct, maybe unilateral diplomacy directly to saving lives. It signals his whole approach. Results over process, often outside those traditional big organizations.
And speaking of the unexpected,
Okay.
right in the middle of all this, the sources mention a technical glitch. The teleprompter apparently malfunctioned.
Yeah. That detail stood out. He actually stopped and said the operator is in big trouble.
It's such a small thing, but what does it signal?
Well, I think it breaks that formal UN atmosphere, doesn't it? It kind of asserts his control, shows he's not just reading a script, turns a technical hiccup into this moment of, relatable off-the-cuff authority, keeps everyone, including you listening, on their toes.
Okay, so from his own claimed successes and that little technical detour, he then really turned his fire onto the institution he was actually addressing.
Yeah.
The UN itself.
Right. The critique was sharp. He kept asking rhetorically, what is the purpose of the UN?
And concluded it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. That's pretty direct.
His core argument was basically inaction, bureaucratic paralysis.
Yeah.
Especially when he compared it to his own claimed record on ending those wars.
He specifically said that the UN did not even try to help with those deals, said he never got a single call offering assistance. That's a serious charge against an organization meant for global mediation.
It ties directly into his main criticism, that the UN is all talk, no teeth. He complained they just seem to write strongly worded letters and never follow up.
And his alternative.
Very clear. Empty words don't solve war. The only thing that solves war and wars is action. That really sums up his skepticism towards these large consensus-based bodies. He sees them as prioritizing process over actual results.
And there was another sort of quirky detail our sources picked up, another physical complaint almost, that kind of underscores this impatience. The escalator.
Oh, right, the escalator stopping midway. And he claimed the First Lady would have fallen if she wasn't in such great shape.
It seems almost trivial, but
it serves a purpose, doesn't it? Complain about the building's infrastructure. It's like a metaphor. He's suggesting the whole institution is physically, and therefore functionally, broken. It makes the big critique feel more grounded, more relatable, perhaps.
that's a really interesting way to look at it. So from malfunctioning escalators to, well, high-stakes geopolitics, let's focus now on the Ukraine conflict part of the speech. This is where those economic threats really came in.
Mm-hmm. He started with a relatively mild comment about Moscow, saying the conflict is damaging Russia's image and not making Russia look good, sort of a diplomatic opener.
But then came the hammer, the claim that really got everyone talking.
Exactly. The direct statement that China and India are funding the war, naming them specifically. That's a huge escalation, calling out two major global powers like that.
Why do that? What's the likely strategy behind calling out China and India right there at the UN?
Well, it's probably not just about Ukraine, right? It's leverage. These are key BRICS nations. He seems to be challenging the idea they can just sit on the sidelines economically. He's arguing their trade, particularly energy buys, is effectively bankrolling the conflict.
And he didn't stop there. He used that claim to pivot to Europe and NATO.
Yeah, pointing out that even NATO has not cut off much Russian energy, which then set up the big policy threat, tariffs.
So the U.S. is fully prepared to impose a very strong round of powerful tariffs if Russia doesn't make a deal. A clear economic stick tied to a military goal.
Very clear. But here's the catch, the really tricky part, the effectiveness of these U.S. tariffs. He tied it directly to European action.
Right. The sources emphasize this condition. He said for U.S. tariffs to work, European nations would have to join us in adopting the exact same measures.
And this is crucial. They must immediately cease all energy purchases from Russia. Immediately. That puts immense pressure on Europe, demanding a sudden, probably painful economic shift. It's a huge ask.
It really changes the dynamic, tying unilateral U.S. threats to total European compliance on energy. Now, before we move off this section, the sources do note he also included more collaborative message regarding the Middle East.
Yes, important to note. He offered the hand of American leadership and friendship and had that specific united message regarding Hamas. Release the hostages now. So it wasn't all threats and critiques.
Good point. So let's move to the final segment outlined in our sources. This covered some really distinct ideological positions, specifically on borders and climate.
Yeah, the speed shifted here, laying down some pretty stark lines in the sand on these two very polarized issues.
Starting with immigration, what is the message he delivered to the world leaders gathered there?
Well, it was deliberately provocative for that setting. He urged countries to end the failed experiment of open borders right now, and then added the warning, your countries are going to hell. Pretty blunt stuff.
And characteristically for this address, he threw in a self-assessment right after that warning.
Yes. I'm really good at this stuff.
Yeah.
The implication being, his border policies aren't just for the U.S., they're a model the world needs to adopt, or else.
Then came the pivot to climate change. And the language here was equally strong, if not stronger.
Definitely. He called climate change the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, and referred to the carbon footprint concept as a hoax made up by people with evil intentions. Extremely skeptical, highly combative language against the global consensus.
And he didn't just state the skepticism, he linked it to an economic argument about green energy policies, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
This is where it gets really interesting from a policy perspective. He argued that these brutal green energy policies basically just move jobs around. His argument is that manufacturing shifts from developed countries that, quote, follow the insane rules to, quote, polluting countries that break the rules. So he's framing environmental action as economic self-harm in a competitive global market, a zero-sum game.
Wow. Okay, so summing up this whole address, it really covered a massive range, from declaring U.S. strength and personal diplomatic wins to really harsh critiques of the UN, major economic threats, and these very strong ideological stances.
I think if you boil it down, the main goal seems to be presenting this offer of American leadership, but it's conditional. It's leadership and friendship if other nations align with U.S. priorities on trade, on borders, and if they accept this skepticism towards international norms and climate action. It's very much about results, his kind of results, over traditional diplomatic process.
That's a great summary. A results-focused ultimatum, really, delivered on the world stage. Which brings us back, like you said earlier, to that core tension highlighted in the sources, strongly worded letters versus unilateral action.
And given everything we've discussed, the claims about ending wars directly, the criticism of the UN as ineffective, maybe the final thought for you, the listener, to consider is this. How do you actually weigh these things in diplomacy? What's the real value of multilateral consensus versus the maybe faster but potentially disruptive impact of one nation acting alone, conditionally?
And thinking about this specific speech with all its different parts,
Hmm.
what do you think was the most significant policy signal, the thing most likely to shape the next year, versus what might have been more, let's say, rhetorical performance?
That's the key question moving forward, watching how the world responds.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.